Welcome back, everybody. So this is part 2 with Jennifer Manzo. Now, remember I told you in part 1, we've created a partnership. The HVAC Know-It-All app is now free. Okay. Get on there, create a profile, follow people, and write your help question in the app. Hopefully we get some responses. Save that response for later, and then call Jen's tech support line. You should have got the number in the last episode because she yells it out loud in the last episode. So second part of this, what we're going to do here is talk about non-invasive testing. This is basically talking about not putting gauges on a system to make sure it's running within range. It's very important not to gauge up onto everything. Every maintenance does not need to have a set of gauges on it. It does not. You listen to the podcast, I'm talking to Jen about how I've never hooked up gauges to certain circuits of certain rooftops that were under my care, and they just ran every year, not a problem. Okay. So listen up, guys. This is the HVAC Know-It-All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCreadie. As an HVAC contractor, we need to be insured, and it makes a lot of sense to have the same insurance company look after all our needs. Lambert Insurance Services has been protecting HVAC contractors since 2009. From general liability to workers' comp, bonding, commercial auto, and more, they've got you covered. Call Lambert Insurance Services for a free quote at 801-937-7030. Most people are visual learners, and they have to actually see the motions and the movements being done to learn. So that's interesting as well. But I appreciate you telling me that, because once in a while you wonder, like, what am I doing here? Like, I just feel like and then you get these messages from people. Oh man, I read your post or I saw your video and it got me through my call or my night or whatever. And I'm like, thank you for sending me that, because this is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think where I was going with this is, I think we all started not knowing in this online world, just trying to get into it, not actually knowing what the hell we were doing. We've all found a path where we want to all help, right? In some form or the
for every one of us. We're not all doing it the same way.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, some people have kept their nose to the grindstone and they've been successful at it. Some people tried and faded away, and some people are still going and they're gonna reach the top. Yep. My goal is to continue this and to get into all different kinds of avenues. And I'm revamping my app that I've got probably very soon to make it free for everybody. And I'm actually starting to look at making some courses myself later in the year with some help from some people. So that was a meeting I had today with a couple people is about actually starting to create courses. So, I mean, there's just so many things that we can do with this trade to help. And the manufacturer is very difficult to get a hold of now. I waited 4 days for someone to call me back one time.
Since COVID, right? It's been like night and day. It's awful.
Yeah. Some manufacturers will ask you if you've had the training. And I'm like, what training? Or you got to come down to Texas for a week before we'll talk to you. Like, really? Your unit's in front of me in Toronto, but I got to go to Texas for a week in order to get access to your tech support. And every time someone says that to me, I fight back. I'm like, listen, I'm trying to make your unit run so the person that bought it thinks it's a good product. So help me make them think your product is good by helping me through the service call. Right?
And we get that question all the time. When people call the line, they'll be like, okay, so I have a Carrier, XF1. Are you guys like brand specific? And we're like, no, and I don't care what your model number is. I don't care about any of it. Just what's wrong with it? What's going on?
Yeah.
It works out a lot better. Like, things get happening.
No, for sure. And you don't really need to know the model number of the unit to diagnose a problem. Unless it's a brand specific proprietary type issue or something like that. Yeah. Then for sure. But most things have a sequence of operations. Right. And if you know those sequence of operations, where are we getting held up? Are we getting held up in the beginning, at the end? Where is the hold up? Okay. So if you know where we're getting held up, and you know the sequence and you know the fundamentals, you could probably get through 99% of the calls.
And also, so I learn on my tech support line better than I've learned anywhere else, I'm sure. Because I've seen now, I have my own experience with my own company where I'm installing and servicing and maintaining all this equipment. But then I get the experience of 40 other techs a day also under my belt. So I'm able to, at this point, I can answer the phone and they're like, hey, I have a furnace that isn't flaming. And I'm like, okay, check your sequence of ops. Where are you at? And that's it. We can figure out anything from there. Like, you're so right, Gary, about that. I wish more people would look at the sequence of operations of a unit. I really do. That's what I teach the most of.
If you understand those and you know, if there's 10 parts to the sequence and on part 6, okay, we're not continuing on from there. Okay, so then let's figure out why you're getting held up right there.
Yep.
And sometimes a set of jumpers comes in real handy. Okay, I'm going to jump. I'm going to bypass that thing, right? But just remember to take your jumpers off when you're done. We got to learn a lot about you there and what you're up to, and the HVAC Chicks Coalition and everybody that's on board, and you're doing wonderful things. And I appreciate you teaching me all of this, because I didn't know how in-depth it was. So very, very cool. Let's talk about non-invasive testing, because that seems to be, I mean, smart tools. I just looked at my very first, and I'm going to make a post about this, the very first testo gauges that I ever did a review on. It's like 9 years ago. And I'm looking at the video and it's so cringy how I made it and all that kind of stuff. At that time, I said, I mean, this is the future of the industry. It's this digital way of taking readings and capturing information to make better diagnostics. And most of the people just laughed. Oh, it's a fad. But they cost too much money, this and that. And now I look at the industry. You go through your Instagram feed, you'd be hard pressed to find a guy with analog gauges doing a service call and making content. And I'm going to make a piece of content in retrospect, how that thought process of this is the future came to fruition. And I made this with press. Press is the future. Brazing, it will decline. It's just a given. It will decline. I've said it with many different things, just because I've taken the time to understand what the product is, taken the time to understand the company, the R&D behind it. And then when you get onto a platform like Facebook or Instagram, you go, okay, guys, this is the future. And people just see it for the first time and they laugh, but they haven't taken the time to actually think about why. Anyway, so non-invasive testing, smart tools, it is the now and it's going to be the future. So tell us what non-invasive testing is, first of all.
Non-invasive testing shouldn't be new. First of all, it is new though. And like you're saying, it is
beer can cold is non-invasive testing.
Right? True. Yeah. I guess I would explain. I don't want to define it because I don't like doing that. That's not a technician way to talk. What I like to do is tell them that it is just diagnosing your system without hooking up your gauges. And I don't mean not using smart tools. All I mean is not hooking up your gauges to the service ports, and that's it. So that is how we define it. What's important about it is probably the lack of loosing a whole bunch of refrigerant out of the unit, whether it's to the atmosphere or into our gauges or into a recovery tank. It doesn't matter. We don't need to be pulling refrigerant out of units. Jim Bergman told me you should only be hooking up to, Jim Bergman of Measure Quick, those who don't know, told me you should only hook up to a unit twice in its life. And so my entire goal now with what I teach is to teach how to only hook up twice in a unit's life. And it's much easier said than done, right? Like, we're used to showing up and hooking up our gauges. But that is the gist of non-invasive testing.
I talked to Jim about this 5 years ago. We have a podcast. I remember promoting that podcast and just so many people laughing at me. But it's not funny, because here's what I said to Jim. And I don't remember, this is not the exact wording, but this is the gist of it. So when I was working for a contractor, I had a building it was a warehouse, but it was pharma. So it had, the whole warehouse was cooled, dehumidified, heated. So it had tons of rooftops on the roof. It had 6 or 7 walk-in boxes that had redundant systems. So every walk-in box had 2 systems. One goes down, the other one fires up. Right? So all in all, in circuits of refrigeration, air conditioning and refrigeration, we're just calling them circuits of refrigeration, right? There's 50 to 60, maybe 70 circuits. So you go there to do a PM, and it's cutthroat where I am to get these PMs, right? So you got to come in lowballing for your PM and find repairs while you're there. So a PM for this building, for instance, would be like 25 hours for a technician. Every single one of those rooftops has 10 filters in it. So you got to drag all the filters up. You got to change them. You got to check all the belts, tension them, replace them if they need. And then when you're done all that, now you have to figure out if the cooling's running properly with the last 8 hours you've got left. So there were systems that landed on that roof, probably out of 50 to 60 circuits, maybe 3 or 4 of them in the 10 years I looked after that building had gauges on them. But
Wow.
every year, every summer they ran. And Jim brought up a good point during that podcast, I believe, is like, when was the last time you had your gauges on your refrigerator in your kitchen? Never. So why does a technician think that every time they go to a residential service, they have to hook up their gauges?
Yeah.
Why? Right? Why? We're not going to hook up our gauges to our refrigerator every year.
It's a
We're
crazy
not.
backwards thought process. Is right. That just came.
It
And
is.
Corey,
But
why did it come from analogs? I understand now, right? Like we have digital gauges that tell us temperatures, but why did we start doing that when we had analogs?
going back, and the reason why I said non-invasive testing is beer can cold is because,
Yep.
like, literally, I'd be on the roof, I'd throw my jumpers on all 4 stages of the rooftop,
Yep.
and I'd turn the power on, let them all stage up, make sure they all ran, and I would literally go suction line, liquid line, suction line, liquid line, feel the top of the compressor, feel the body of the compressor real quick. And that was, if I took the time to hook up my gauges to every single system, it would have taken me a week. But
Yeah.
there was no reason to do it. But do you know how many times I found a problem because of that? We got 4 compressors running, 4 systems running in this rooftop.
Yep.
All the suction lines are the same temperature. This one here is about 10 degrees warmer. Okay, well, now I might put my gauges on this one to see what's going on, right? To get a better indication of what's happening. But
Yep.
up until that point, why would I throw my gauges on a system, potentially removing refrigerant, potentially adding contaminants, potentially forgetting to put the cap back on or losing the O-ring that goes inside and causing a leak? There's all kinds of things that could go wrong just gauging up and pulling your gauges off.
It confuses you more too. I mean, if it's a cold day and you're gauging up to every system and you see, a system that is maybe running, but it's in low fire and you've now gauged up and you're seeing, say, a lower low side than the rest of them. That's going to do nothing but confuse you. It means absolutely nothing, but it's just going to give you something else to be confused about. There's no reason to gauge up to every unit, especially if you have a whole bunch of rooftops. That's I would say that's the worst situation, to gauge up to every unit.
And like I said, like 90% of those machines in that building never had gauges on them ever.
Right.
But
So why
for the
now?
10 years I took care of it, they ran perfectly fine. So I cringe when I see technicians saying, gauge up every maintenance, gauge up every service, or you're doing the customer a disservice if you don't gauge up. Well, in my mind, you're doing the customer disservice by putting your gauges on.
Yeah.
Unless there is an actual problem.
Yes.
Right? If there is an actual problem.
If you've verified airflow and like you verified cleanliness and you still have a problem where, like, to the touch, like Gary's saying, you guys, you can literally touch these lines and tell whether there's something wrong or not with your hands. So, I mean, if you've got a problem and then you've verified airflow and you've checked for cleanliness on both the indoor and outdoor unit, you've made sure that all of your wiring connections are tight and that your compressor's not rot, then okay, gauge up. Otherwise, you're skipping all those steps just for your gauges to tell you what your hands could have told you.
I haven't been on MeasureQuick in a while. Sorry, Jim, if you're listening to this. But Ben, I work with Ben closely, and he's heavily involved with MeasureQuick. But I've got a very good slogan for MeasureQuick if Jim ever wanted to hire me to market his product, that it would take off like nothing, and it would be in everybody's mouth within a month or 2. I can't reveal it. That secret's going to die with me. Anyway, I don't use it very often. I use the Testo line of products, so I'm usually mostly on the Testo app. I just find it just easy to open and work with. But is the non-invasive testing part of MeasureQuick, is that a free part of the app?
Not only is it a free part of the app, but it's something that I feel should have been now along and is just now there. Like you said, Jim's been preaching non-invasive system testing for decades, probably, I would say. And to have, if you got to go and do it to see it for yourself, but the way that they have it set up is so easy to use. And it's just like such a slick workflow. It doesn't make anything harder to do necessarily. It's just you put in your values a little bit differently. But then also, if you do need to gauge up to a system, it didn't change MeasureQuick to a point where it's going to make it more difficult to do it that way either. It's still going to pick up your job link or your Testo app, whatever it is. And then, they're doing the NCI thing, they're doing the TEC thing. So MeasureQuick just does everything. There's no reason not to use it, especially if you're a newer tech. And like techs like Gary, I can understand completely, you guys, why he doesn't use MeasureQuick often, because he knows the stuff in his head that it's going to tell him on the app. Anybody who
Yeah.
doesn't feel that way should be using it.
I hate the beer can cold phrase myself, but I went through the trade feeling and touching for years and using the senses as a way to troubleshoot, using the senses first. If you know, especially if you know a building, if you're the guy, that the HVAC chick that goes to the building on a regular basis, you should have, and this is why I really like when it's the same tech that takes care of that business. That can turn into, if the tech leaves, that can turn into a shit show if the tech takes that customer, but it's the best way to service that particular building, if it's commercial, if it's residential, whatever it is. It's the same tech going back all the time because they get to know the equipment. And as they know the equipment and build sort of like this kind of grassroots sort of relationship with the equipment, the way it sounds, the way it feels. Because I could pop onto a roof of a building that I've worked on for years and go, something doesn't sound right up here.
Yeah.
Right. Because like there's a belt loose or there's an exhaust fan clunking or something, and then you go straight to it. But a technician that just arrives there for the first time, they hear a bit of a sound that doesn't sound crazy abnormal. They don't know that it is abnormal because they've only heard it once. But I can go onto a roof and hear that. I've been there 30 times in the last 2 years. I know the sounds, the way this building's supposed to sound. It's not supposed to sound like this. That compressor's not supposed to vibrate that much. It's not supposed to be that hot. That coil's not supposed to be that dirty, or you know what I mean?
Or I personally changed that belt last month. It shouldn't sound that way.
Yeah.
So you did it too.
I said there's a real chunk of troubleshooting that comes from feeling, touching, smelling. I've walked into buildings and I'm like, yep, your blower motor is dead.
Oh yeah.
Because the whole building, the whole building smells like burnt windings because the blower motor blew it into the space. There's just certain things that after a while you get good with your senses. And then if your senses take you to a point, you got to verify it with some test tools afterwards, right? But your senses can do a lot up front.
I agree 100%. And I think too, like there's big things that we can do with our senses that we forget about because we have smart tools sometimes, right? So like if I walk onto a roof where I have a bunch of refrigeration equipment, yes, some suction lines are just going to be frozen. It's just a thing in refrigeration. We just see it all the time. And also if I've been on this same roof 50 times and that one's never been frozen, now I know that there's something going on there, right? And I don't need smart tools to tell me that. And I don't need gauges to tell me that. I just need to pay attention. But we tend to drop the paying attention part for our smart tools because we think they're going to do everything for us. When it comes to thermistors, thermometers, temperature probes, you're absolutely right. It will do your job for you. Anything else is not going to do it for you. You're going to have to do it yourself. Like if I'm on a tech support call and I say, okay, so what's your supply temp? And they're like, oh, I haven't put my psychrometers in there yet. Okay, but you can feel it with your hand. Is it hot? You know what I mean? Those kinds of things. We tend to just jump right over them now and I got to go get my tools. But there's a lot you can do with just your senses too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And have you done any deep diving into thermal cameras? Because these things are like just phenomenal. I mean, by the time you set up your probes and thermistors and all that, you can take a good thermal camera and go whoop like that. And you've actually got a snapshot of many different things. Like I was on a call recently where they were blaming the boiler system for not heating spaces. The boilers were satisfied. They were set right. The pumps were running. You go into the spaces and the walls have literally cold spots and hot spots. And the cold spots were below 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I said, well, there's where your cold air is coming from. It's coming from the building envelope. It's not coming from the actual boiler or lack thereof heat from the boiler.
I use them all the time. So I'm an engineer too. I do HVAC design for contractors across the country. It's another part of my HVAC business. I do like manual JSD. I do commercial. I do everything, boiler layouts, that kind of stuff. That's the number one thing for me is, a contractor can give me the plans for the house, like an existing house we'll talk about for this situation. So they can give me the plans. They can tell me what's going to be there. They can tell me everything about that space. But unless they've run a blower door, they can't tell me the infiltration. They can't tell me if I have envelope leaks that are going to adjust the size of my units that I need them to put in. And people don't think about how much goes into that. But you walk through there with a thermal camera and you send me that video, I now know for a fact what size that unit has to be. And it's not going to be wrong. It's always going to work. And when I'll tell you, these are where you need to seal. This is where I need sealed before you can put in this size equipment. But this is the size that you need after you've done that. And it ends up getting contractors more work because now they're the ones that are subbing out those, envelope closures. I can tell them that this, this type of unit isn't going to work in this space. Now you need to go with this type of unit instead. All kinds of stuff just from a thermal camera. That easy.
You also do engineering stuff too. That's another that's another thing on top of what you do. I don't know how I find time to do some of the things
Right.
I do, but you seem like you've got your hats in every ring out there in the HVAC world.
I have a really great schedule, but also I do what I want to do. And that's what you guys, like, anybody listening to this, that's what it is. That's what it boils down to. If somebody doesn't want to do something, they'll come up with any excuse in the world not to do it. But if somebody does want to do something, they can come up with any excuse in the world to do it. And that's what I do. That's what I like to do.
You said you have a really great schedule, and the fact that you're an entrepreneur allows you to create that schedule
Exactly.
for yourself. And the power of saying no
is huge.
Yeah, because people think that every time the phone rings, they have to go, and then they put themselves into too many places at once, and they end up letting some people down because they can't do everything, and they can't. So the power of saying no, I've found, is very empowering to be able to say, no, sorry, I can't do that. I'm busy. I'm doing other things today.
And even just like with influencing, imagine if you said yes to every company that approached you. You'd be selling things that nobody wants or that people shouldn't be buying or putting your name on. I have so many influencing contracts, but all of them are ones that I use. Like, I'm not going to do a Malco shoot if I don't want to use this. You know what I mean? You have to say no.
Yeah, no, when it comes to that kind of stuff, my first question is, how are we educating the audience? The other thing is, I run a business. People still think that they can come to you and go, oh, I got this great tool. I'll send it to you for free if you do a review on it. And I'm like, that's not how business works. What I was going to say was, I recently said no to something, and some people didn't agree with me saying no because I put it out on Instagram. A lot of people did agree, but a lot of people didn't. And I'll tell you the story, and you can tell me what you think.
I think I did agree, if it's what I'm thinking of.
Let's just put it out there that I do not like residential HVAC. I don't really enjoy it, okay? I've spent my life in commercial. I enjoy the more complex sort of problems. I enjoy the fact that commercial, in a lot of cases, your heat's down, but you're not sleeping in the building. So I don't need to fix it today. I can figure out what's wrong, order the parts, come back and do it in a timely manner. I like that aspect of it. So I went to a call where the lady told me her son-in-law thinks he knows what the problem is. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I don't take the diagnosis of a homeowner and go, yeah, I'm going to check that first. Never anybody do that. Okay. Start in the beginning and go through it. So I got there. There's a pressure switch sitting on top of the furnace, and there's a new one inside that doesn't even match the specs of the one that's sitting on top of the furnace. He had changed it. And I said, what else did he do to this? She's like, oh, I don't know. I said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not touching it, because who knows what he did. If he swapped wires somewhere, I'm like, I don't need this in my life, because you're sleeping here tonight. And if I go through this and I miss something and something happens to this furnace, it's on me, because I'm the last guy that touched it. So I walked away from it.
You buy it. That's what my first boss ever told me. Never touch a unit unless you want it to be yours.
That's the power that you have when you are an entrepreneur. You set your own schedule, and you don't, unless you absolutely in dire need to feed your family, then yes, go tackle it. But it wasn't something I was willing to do at that point, because
absolutely,
I would have to go through every single component now in that furnace to make sure it actually matches that it's supposed to be there, because she didn't know what else he had done. He could have ordered 3 or 4 parts off of Amazon and switched them, could have switched limits, could have done anything, right? Yeah. So I would have to go through that whole thing, parts list, check them off. Yeah, it's the right parts. Check all the wiring.
Has the thing been maintained? Do I have a crack in my heat exchanger that nobody knew about or cared about? Like, there's so many things that are dangerous too that you just can't leave it to somebody's son-in-law.
I developed a policy after a while that I don't install homeowner bought parts or homeowner bought equipment.
We don't either. Even if it's at like a mini split, one of those DIY mini splits. If we get a call for one of those, it's literally a no, period. And I don't even care. Like, I don't want to hear the situation, because I don't feel bad. You bought a DIY, piece of equipment. Now you have to DIY the service of it, period.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, cool, man. Well, I've had you for an hour, Jen. I feel like we could probably talk for another 2-3 hours, because we're both passionate about this and what we're doing. But we'll leave it for now, and we'll get back on. Let's do another one with Ryan, like you and Ryan. like we'll do a podcast compilation. Just tell everybody what your podcast is and what you guys are up to there, and we'll end it off that way.
Sure. We have a podcast called Misfits of HVAC. It's me and Ryan Hughes. He's my HVAC from YouTube. And we have huge hitting industry guests on every single week. And we just have a lot of fun. That's it. It's the whole show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. So we will get together and do another one. We'll have to think of a topic. We'll deep dive into that a little bit. But thank you very much, Jem.
Thank you.